Welcome to my video. You can tell that it's spooky season by the candle mood lighting and the fact that this is a bourbon pumpkin candle. And because it's spooky season, I wanted to talk about a misinformation thing, cults, because cults are spooky. I mean, they can be really spooky sometimes. Sometimes they're just funny. But today I wanted to talk about how cults and misinformation are related. And maybe this will inform how we can maybe start treating people who are embedded in misinformation a little bit better. Ow, that's fucking hot. So, to begin, I want to talk about how cult members and people engrossed in misinformation are similar. And I want to talk about it from three different ways. I'll talk about cognitive bias, and then I want to talk about the people who make them believe the things that they do, and I want to also talk about the influence and control aspect of conspiracy theories and cults. Beginning with cognitive bias, it's something I actually talked about in my previous video, and you can go watch that for a more detailed explanation, but basically the gist is that people who believe in misinformation oftentimes find evidence to support their belief rather than find evidence and then believe something because of that. And it turns out it's very similar, and this cognitive bias thing tends to radiate in cults as well. There was a psychologist in the 50s known as Leon Festinger, and he is famous for having written a book with a couple other people called When Prophecy Fails. And the gist and it's a somewhat unethical study nowadays, but he basically embedded himself and a few of his colleagues in a doomsday cult in New York. And in this doomsday cult, they believed that aliens were going to take them away and the entire world was going to be destroyed. But when they embedded themselves in and they eventually got to the doomsday date, that didn't happen, obviously, because we're still here. But the interesting thing is that in that moment of realizing that midnight had struck and nothing was coming, no aliens were there, the world was not destroyed, they all just kind of sat in silence for about 4 hours until eventually the cult leader said, "Actually, I just heard from the aliens and everything's okay. We saved the world because we were so willing to leave everything behind." So these people who had sold all of their worldly possessions and completely cut ties with everyone they ever knew now was then going around telling New York and people going in interviews and saying that they saved the world when they didn't. And they basically just latched on to that belief that this was the only worldview they could accept, and therefore when they were given something to explain what had happened, they immediately latched onto it and were like, this is the explanation. Cult members and people in misinformation are similar in another way, in that oftentimes there are people who influence them to think that the things that they do, and actually most of the time people influence them, i.e. cult leaders and disinformation actors. For disinformation actors, I will mention Alex Jones, who's a well-known conspiracy theorist. He runs the site InfoWars, and he spouts anything from kind of funny things about like chemicals turning frogs gay to actual harmful things where he believes that people who were experiencing mass shootings actually just were actors and nothing was actually happening, and these shootings didn't happen. And the main thing that makes him a disinformation actor is that he benefits extremely off of spreading this misinformation all the time, because his followers are often heading over to the store page and buying things that he recommends, like this brain juice stuff that says, I guess if the 5G waves are going to take over your brain, then you need the brain juice, right? And you might think that sounds ridiculous, but people buy it. That's why they sell it, and it makes them money, and that's a motivator for Alex Jones. Like, he does the things he does not necessarily because he believes them, which to an extent I also believe that he believes the things he says, but also because he benefits greatly off of it. The cult example of this is Jim Jones, who is a well-known cult leader, and he basically created a city in the jungle, or a town in the jungle, known as Jonestown. And there he isolated a bunch of people, took away their passports, had entire families come there, and eventually this resulted in a mass suicide where some 900 people died. For causes not really known, for ideals not really known, and Jim Jones himself also committed suicide, but everybody there had this, overwhelming feeling that he was the one that was going to tell them, how the world works, and they believed in him greatly enough to do something as drastic as that. And for him, it's not as much of a monetary gain. I mean, he ran an entire city, he ran a town of 1,000 people, but it's also just a power and influence thing. Just to have influence over that many people is something that people just don't let go of. It's a great power that people just are abuse. Then there's also the aspect of the influence and control. Cults, we'll say Scientology for this one, tend to use things like certain ideals to kick people out who don't follow the ideals of Scientology. And this leads to families being separated where they're, excommunicado. They can't talk to anybody who's outside of the cult, and they're antagonists of the cult, and therefore cannot talk to anybody in the cult, and they're completely ousted from the community, which is not a great thing, especially if your entire family is there. And I feel like I see, news articles every other year of some celebrity who left the cult and is now being ousted by it, or their family left it, and then the celebrity's still in it, and now it's a problem. And in the similar vein, misinformation people engrossed in misinformation, have that same thing where when they eventually have that moment of realization and they say, I think I might be wrong, they will reach out to their community and say, hey, I think we're wrong, guys. And they get a lot of pushback, and they don't convince anybody, because the people there are not ready to switch their mind, and they were, and now they think that they are the one who got by the government, and now the government got to them or something like that. There's a Politico article that talks about this ex-QAnon guy's experience that I think is pretty great, and it kind of talks about how even when he got out of it, he couldn't convince his own father to get out of it as well. And even though they were family and stuff, it just didn't work. He didn't believe it. He would rather believe that, the liberal pedophiles got to him and brainwashed him or something. This all kind of gets to my point of cult members and people who are in misinformation, and I'm not talking about disinformation actors. I'm talking about just your everyday person engrossed in a conspiracy theory, are quite similar, and they are being misled by people for some person's gain. But what I noticed is a huge difference is that oftentimes cult members, when they leave, ex-cult members are seen as victims, which is true. They've been completely manipulated, and they are victims of the cult leaders. But the general consensus about conspiracy theories, and especially things like science misinformation, is that people are just too stupid to understand, and they will get this. I anecdotally had seen tons of arguments online where, a scientist is arguing with some guy who, works at a factory or whatever, and is like, "You're an idiot," and then that immediately halts the conversation, and you're not going to get anything out of it, and it's just a social media fist fight at that point. And I guess what I want to say by comparing these two groups is that you might notice that actually in reality they're both victims of some greater machination, and they should be treated as such, right? I want to get the point across to other scientists, but also people who are not in conspiracy theories, who have family members and conspiracy theories, things like that, that, you know, don't call people stupid. Like, that's not going to help anybody at all. And not only that, but you have to come at it from an empathetic point of view, in that realizing that they are not stupid. Like, it's not stupidity that got them to the point where they were believing in this. It's a complex set of other issues that I can go into in other videos, but the main thing is that these people are being influenced, and really it's quite sad, and like, you should want to help these people, and you should have helping energy about you, and not like a derogatory, I don't think anything's going to change, because what's the point of doing any kind of advocacy for science or anything if you're just going to completely crap on other people and not go down to their level. Regardless, that's about all I have to say about that. If you like hearing me talk about misinformation stuff, give me a subscribe or like my video. I am having a fun time with this, and I hope you are too. I find misinformation to be incredibly intriguing, and I'm really trying to push this initiative that people should think more about the other person on the side of the keyboard, you know? People should really think about that it's another person on the other side, and that oftentimes it's not their fault, and that they're not like some horrible person most of the time. So, anyways, I hope you all have a happy Halloween. I'm technically recording this on Halloween. I'm not sure it will come out on Halloween, but happy spooky season. That's why I'm doing a video on cults. I'll see you in the next video.